Before you hear this story, I need you to do something for me. I need you to picture my husband, Richard, and picture a man who wears success like a tailored suit, a little too tight across the shoulders. He has that easy, confident smile that puts bank managers at ease and makes other men feel slightly inadequate. He's the kind of man who calls wine vino without a trace of irony, and who believes his opinions aren't just opinions, but baseline facts the rest of the world has yet to catch up with. He ran a mid-sized logistics company, a business he'd inherited from his father, and expanded with a kind of ruthless, brute force ambition. To the outside world, he was the brilliant entrepreneur, the self-made man who wasn't really self-made at all, and I was his quiet, supportive wife, Nancy. The elegant, unassuming accessory on his arm at fundraisers. The one who remembered his clients' birthdays and his mother's favorite flowers. The one who managed the home, the finances, the life that orbited his magnificent son. And for 15 years, I played that part beautifully. I played it so well, I think I even managed to convince myself. But all of this is just context. It's the scenery for the real story. The real story begins, not with a bang, but with a quiet, polite knock on my front door. If you like stories about getting back what's yours, and then some, I have a feeling you're in the right place. Stick around, and I'll tell you how my husband's brilliant plan to frame me for a crime he committed crashed and burned because of my boring little Wednesday night book club. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and drizzling, the kind of day that makes the world feel small and muffled. I was in my home office, a room Richard had designed for me with condescending affection. A place for you to do your little projects, honey, he'd said. My little projects included managing our entire investment portfolio, a task he found tedious, but was more than happy to reap the rewards from. I was reconciling our quarterly statements when the doorbell chimed. I wasn't expecting anyone. Richard was at the office, and our cleaner came on Fridays. When I opened the door, 2 people stood on our meticulously swept bluestone porch, a man and a woman, dressed in sober, professional attire that screamed law enforcement. They weren't in uniform, but they had that unmistakable air of quiet, non-negotiable authority. Nancy Parker, the woman asked. Her eyes were sharp, analytical. Yes, that's me, I said, my hand tightening on the doorknob. My heart had started a low, anxious drumming against my ribs. I'm Detective Albright, and this is Detective Miller. We're with the Financial Crimes Unit. May we come in for a moment? Financial crimes. The 2 words seemed to suck the air from my lungs. I stepped back, a numb automaton, and gestured them into the foyer. Richard's company, it had to be. He'd been stressed lately, more so than usual, snapping about profit margins and supply chain issues. I assumed it was the economy. We sat in the formal living room, a space we never used. It was a showroom of our life, with stiff, pristine furniture and art on the walls that Richard had chosen. Detective Albright came straight to the point. Ma'am, we're investigating a significant case of embezzlement from your husband's company, Parker Logistics. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. I felt a strange, detached sense of relief. So that was it. Richard was in trouble. I braced myself, preparing to be the supportive wife, to ask how I could help, to project an image of shocked but steadfast loyalty. But then Detective Miller spoke, his voice gentle, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been accusatory. Mrs. Parker, Nancy, the evidence we've received seems to indicate that you are the primary suspect. The room tilted. The carefully curated art on the walls seemed to blur. I stared at him, convinced I had misheard. Me? That's impossible. I don't have anything to do with the company's finances. I don't have access. Detective Albright slid a thin folder across the polished surface of the coffee table. Your husband provided us with a great deal of information. Reluctantly, I might add. He seems quite distressed. He said he couldn't believe it himself, that he must have missed the signs. Distressed. Of course he was. Richard was a fantastic actor. I opened the folder. Inside were network security logs, pages and pages of them, with dates and IP addresses and timestamps. My name was highlighted, next to a series of entries. They showed logins to the company's primary accounting server from an IP address traced directly to our home. My computer, specifically. The logs corresponded perfectly with a series of wire transfers, each one siphoning off tens of thousands of dollars to an offshore account. The total was staggering. Nearly $2 million moved over the course of 6 months. These transfers all occurred on Wednesday nights. Detective Miller pointed out softly. Between 7:30 and 9:30 p.m. Wednesday nights. My blood ran cold. He knew about my book club. Your husband also provided us with security logs from his office building. Albright continued, her voice devoid of emotion. They show him working late in his office, in meetings with his executive team. During the exact times these transfers were initiated from your home IP address. He has a rock-solid alibi for every single transaction. I just stared at the papers. It was a perfect little box, a digital cage, expertly constructed. He had used my routine, my one small act of independence, as the architecture for my downfall. He had stayed late at the office, surrounded by witnesses, while he used his own administrative access to drain his company, knowing the digital fingerprints would point back here, to this house, to my computer, to me, the quiet, unassuming wife, sitting at her desk, supposedly doing her little projects. It was brilliant, it was evil, and it was so quintessentially Richard. He'd always believed he was the smartest person in any room, and this was his masterpiece. He was going to let the company collapse, pin the crime on me, collect the insurance, and walk away with the $2 million he had stolen, looking like the tragic, betrayed husband. I could feel the detectives watching me, waiting for my denial, my tears, my hysterics. They expected me to fall apart. And for a second, I almost did. I felt the hot sting of tears welling up, the scream of betrayal clawing at my throat. But then, something else rose up to meet it. A cold, hard clarity. He thought he was clever. He thought he knew everything. He knew I had a book club on Wednesday nights. He knew I was always home, always at my desk, with my laptop. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that my boring little book club wasn't just about discussing the symbolism in the latest prize-winning novel. It wasn't just a book club, it was my lifeline, and it was about to become my weapon. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. At that moment, it was about survival. But as I looked at the pity in the detectives' eyes, the pity they felt for this poor, duped housewife, I felt a new resolve harden in my chest. Ain would be about revenge. It just had to be. The moments after the detectives left were a blur of suffocating silence. The house, which had always felt like a gilded cage, now felt like a pre-trial holding cell. I walked from the pristine living room to the gleaming kitchen, touching the cold marble countertops, the stainless steel appliances Richard had insisted on. Everything was his taste, his money, his life. I was just a resident. The detectives hadn't arrested me, not yet. They'd said they were continuing their investigation, that they'd be in touch. They'd left me with a card and a heavy, unspoken suggestion to retain legal counsel. The professional courtesy felt more like a countdown timer. I sank onto a stool at the kitchen island, and my body finally let go. A wave of violent, silent trembling shook me from head to toe. This was the fallout, the shock wave after the explosion. My mind raced, replaying the last 15 years. But now every memory was tinted with the ugly filter of this betrayal. I saw not a successful, ambitious husband, but a cunning, patient predator. Flashbacks started to flood in, not as hazy memories, but as sharp, painful vignettes. I remembered our 10th anniversary. I had planned a surprise trip to a quiet vineyard in Napa. I'd spent months researching, booking a special suite, arranging a private tasting. The night before we were due to leave, he came home late from work, smelling of expensive scotch. He saw the packed bags by the door. "What's all this?" he'd asked, a frown creasing his brow. I smiled, my heart thumping with excitement. "It's a surprise for our anniversary. We're going to Napa." He didn't smile back. He sighed, a heavy, performative sound of a man burdened by the foolish whims of others. Nancy, honestly, you know how critical Q3 is for me. I can't just drop everything and go look at some grapes. It's a lovely thought, darling, but completely impractical. You should have checked with me. He'd patted my cheek, a gesture that looked like affection, but felt like a dismissal. We never went. The non-refundable booking fee was just a casualty of his importance. At the time, I had felt foolish, naive. Now, I saw it for what it was, a lesson. My plans, my desires, were secondary. They were lovely thoughts to be indulged, only when they didn't interfere with his world. Then another memory surfaced, a dinner party about a year ago. One of his junior executives, a bright young man named Kevin, was talking about a new logistics routing software he was developing in his spare time. I, having a background in data analysis before my career as Richard's wife, was fascinated. I asked Kevin a few pointed questions about his algorithm, about scalability, about data security protocols. We were deep in a genuinely interesting conversation when Richard's voice cut through the air like a whip. All right. Let's not bore the poor man to death, honey. He laughed, a booming sound that commanded the table's attention. My Nancy, she loves her little hobbies, thinks she's a tech mogul. He winked at Kevin. She's the one who makes sure my ties match my shirts. That's her real algorithm. The table chuckled politely. I felt my face burn with a hot, creeping shame. I had wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I glanced at Richard, hoping for a flicker of apology in his eyes. But all I saw was the smug satisfaction of a man who had just put his wife back in her place. He hadn't just dismissed my intelligence. He had belittled it, turned it into a charming but silly party trick for public amusement. He was always doing that, planting seeds of doubt, not just in others, but in me. Was I being too sensitive? Was I overreacting? He had a way of making his condescension feel like a joke I was too stupid to get. He called my investment work, playing with your little spreadsheet. The intricate meals I cooked for his business dinners were Nancy whipping something up. He diminished every part of me that wasn't a direct support strut for his own grand ego. For years, I had absorbed these tiny cuts, these 1,000 little dismissals, telling myself it was just his way. I told myself that his ambition required a singular focus, that his stress made him careless with his words. I had made excuses for him, papering over the cracks in our marriage with my own denial. What was I supposed to do? Admitting the truth would have meant admitting my entire life was built on a lie. Sitting there, in that cold, silent kitchen, the denial finally shattered. It wasn't just carelessness, it was a strategy. He needed me to be small, so he could feel big. He needed me to be the boring wife, so no one would ever suspect I could be capable of anything more. And now, he needed me to be the criminal, so he could be the victim. The logic of it was so cruel, so perfectly aligned with his character, that it was undeniable. My trembling stopped. The hot tears of panic and hurt turned into something cold and sharp. This was the catalyst. It was the moment, the years of resentment, the buried anger, the ignored slights, all coalesced into a single point of pure, unadulterated resolve. The grief was still there, a deep, aching wound where my love for him used to be. But it was now surrounded by a wall of ice. He thought I was just Nancy, the quiet wife who arranged flowers and managed the social calendar. He had no idea who I had become on Wednesday nights. He thought my book club was my escape, and it was, but not in the way he imagined. It wasn't an escape from him. It was an escape back to myself, the woman I was before him. The woman who was smart, capable, and had a voice. The man I married had systematically tried to silence that woman, to pack her away in a dusty attic, like an old, forgotten photograph. He didn't realize that every Wednesday night, I was taking her out, dusting her off, and letting her breathe. I stood up from the stool. The fear was gone, replaced by a strange and terrible calm. I walked from the kitchen to my office, the room for my little projects. I sat down at my desk, the very desk he imagined me at, committing his crimes. I looked at my laptop, my lifeline, my weapon. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. And now, it was. He had started a war, convinced he was fighting an unarmed civilian. He was about to find out he was facing an entire army. My finger hovered over the mouse, and then I clicked, opening the door to my secret world. He was up for Ain. Fear was, the one he had no idea even existed. The takedown of Richard Parker had officially begun. The story of my book club began 5 years ago. Not with a book, but with a panic attack. I was at one of Richard's ostentatious charity galas, standing by his side and smiling until my face ached. A man, one of Richard's competitors, had cornered me and was explaining, in excruciating detail, how women's brains weren't wired for the kind of high-level strategic thinking required in logistics. He was saying this to me, a woman who had just rebalanced a 7-figure portfolio that morning, while patting my arm condescendingly. Richard just stood there, nodding along, a smug little smile on his face. In that moment, the ballroom felt like it was closing in. The chatter turned to a roar, and I couldn't breathe. I mumbled an excuse and fled to the ladies' room, where I locked myself in a stall and hyperventilated for 10 minutes. Huddled on that cold marble floor, I realized I was suffocating. Not just in that moment, but in my life. I was disappearing. I needed a space that was mine, a place where my brain was an asset, not a cute anomaly. The next day, I put out a tentative feeler on a private alumni network from my university. The post was simple. Any women in the Seattle, Bellingham, tech or data science fields interested in starting a low-key group to discuss industry trends, challenges, and maybe a book once in a while. The response was immediate and overwhelming. It turned out I wasn't the only one suffocating. Our first meeting was at a coffee shop. There were 4 of us. Me. There was Anya, a brilliant coder with social anxiety, who was fighting to get her own software startup funded in a sea of dismissive male venture capitalists. There was Chloe, a cybersecurity expert for a major corporation, a woman who regularly fought off sophisticated hacking attempts, but had to deal with male colleagues explaining basic concepts to her in meetings. And there was Maria, a data scientist who had been passed over for a promotion in favor of a man she had personally trained. We were supposed to talk about a book, but we never got to it. We spent 3 hours talking about our lives, our work, our frustrations. It was like opening a pressure valve. We started meeting every Wednesday. We called it the book club, as a cover. It was an intentionally bland, domestic-sounding name. It was the perfect camouflage. If Richard ever asked, I could say, "I'm going to book club, dear," and he would picture a group of women drinking Chardonnay and arguing about plot points. His eyes would glaze over with disinterest. It was the perfect shield. The group grew. Within a year, we had over a dozen members. We were a diverse collection of engineers, project managers, startup founders, and cybersecurity analysts. We outgrew coffee shops and started meeting at my house, since I had the space, and Richard was almost always working late. But as our numbers swelled and some members moved away, we faced a new challenge. We wanted to keep the connection, to allow remote members to participate. That's when Chloe, our cybersecurity guru, came up with a brilliant idea. "Why don't we just build our own platform?" she'd said one night, after a particularly frustrating week of fending off a phishing attack at her day job. "A private, encrypted server. We can host our own video conferencing, have a secure forum, a place to store resources. No big tech snooping on our data. No chance of it getting hacked. We can build a fortress." And so we did. It became our collective side project. Chloe handled the server architecture and security protocols, making it virtually impenetrable. Anya, the coder, built the user interface for our live streams and forums. Maria, the data scientist, optimized the data storage. My role, as the project manager, was to keep everyone on track, to define the features, to make sure it met our needs. We paid for the server hosting with our own money, a secret, shared expense. We called it the Athenaeum, a private digital library, and meeting hall just for us. Every Wednesday night, from 7:30 to 9:30, we would log on. The local members would gather in my living room, and we'd set up a high-definition camera and microphone. The remote members would join the live stream. Every single meeting was recorded and automatically uploaded to our secure server, complete with digital watermarks and immutable, cryptographically signed timestamps. We did it for members who couldn't make a meeting, so they could catch up later. It was our own private archive, a record of our journey. We discussed everything from negotiating raises and handling workplace microaggressions to dissecting lines of code and debating the ethics of AI. We helped Anya prep for her VC pitches. We helped Chloe wargame potential security threats. We helped Maria build the statistical models that would eventually prove she was more qualified than the man who got her job. It was a support group, a think tank, a professional development seminar, and a sanctuary, all rolled into one. And it was the source of my alibi, my digital, time-stamped, unassailable alibi for every single fraudulent transaction Richard was trying to pin on me. Back in my office, the detective's card sitting on my desk like a ticking bomb, I logged into the Athenaeum. The interface, so familiar and comforting, now looked like the key to my salvation. I navigated to the media archive. There it was, a neat, orderly list of video files, organized by date, meeting_stream_2023-03-1 5.mp4, meeting_stream_2023-22.mp4, meeting_stream_2023-0329 and so on, for months. For years, I clicked on a file from 6 weeks ago, a date the detectives had specifically mentioned. The video player loaded, and there I was, on screen, in high definition. I was wearing a gray sweater, sitting on my own living room couch. Anya was to my left, gesturing emphatically as she talked about a misogynistic comment from a potential investor. I could be heard, clear as a bell, at the 8:17 p.m. mark, saying, "But did you show him the user retention data, Anya? His opinion doesn't matter if the data proves him wrong." The file's metadata, embedded and unalterable, showed the exact time of recording, cross-referenced with 3 separate network time protocol servers. It was a digital fortress of truth. I felt a wave of dizziness, a giddy, light-headed relief. He thought he was so clever, using security logs. Security logs can be spoofed. IP addresses can be masked. But a high-definition video of a person in a room with a dozen other people, engaged in a 2-hour, continuous, time-stamped conversation, that is irrefutable. That is proof. I spent the next hour downloading every single video file from the last 6 months. Each one was a nail for Richard's coffin. As the progress bars filled up on my screen, a thought struck me. This wasn't just about proving my innocence anymore. That was just the first step. This was about justice. Richard hadn't just tried to frame me. He had tried to destroy me. He was willing to let me go to prison, to be disgraced, to lose everything, just so he could get away with his crime and start a new life with his stolen money. The sheer sociopathic audacity of it was breathtaking. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Richard. "Everything okay, honey? Haven't heard from you." The casual hypocrisy of it made me want to throw the phone against the wall. I took a deep breath. Not yet. The time for confrontation would come, but on my terms, not his. I texted back a simple, "Fine, just busy." Then I made my first call. Not to the police. Not yet. That would be like handing a scalpel to a butcher. They would see the videos, clear my name, and arrest Richard. That was clean. Too clean. It wasn't enough. He had tried to dismantle my life brick by brick. I was going to dismantle his. I needed a surgeon. I looked up the number for the lawyer Anya had on retainer for her startup. A woman named Evelyn Reed, known for being an absolute shark, specializing in corporate law and intellectual property. If anyone could appreciate the beauty of a digital fortress and know how to weaponize it, it would be her. As I dialed her number, I felt a grim satisfaction settle over me. Richard had underestimated me. He had underestimated my friends. He had underestimated my boring little book club. He had built a cage for me out of lies. But he didn't realize I had been spending my Wednesday nights building a war room, and court was now in session. My first meeting with Evelyn Reed was in her downtown office, a sleek, minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an aura of calm, lethal competence. I had expected to have to convince her to plead my case. Instead, I simply set my laptop on her polished concrete conference table, logged into the Athena, and played her 3 of the videos, cross-referencing them with the dates on the police documents. She watched for 10 minutes, her expression unreadable. She didn't look at the videos of me and my friends chatting. She looked at the metadata. She pulled up the source code of the web page, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She scrutinized the cryptographic signature on the timestamp. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "Mr. Parker is a very ambitious man," she said, her voice a low purr, "but he's a sloppy, arrogant fool. This is a prosecutor's dream. It's not just an alibi, Mrs. Parker. It's a work of art. I want more than just my name cleared, Evelyn," I said, my voice steady. He didn't just try to frame me for a crime. He tried to erase me. He built his entire escape plan on the assumption that I was a non-entity. I want him to understand, in no uncertain terms, what a miscalculation that was. Evelyn's smile widened. "I like you, Nancy. Most people in your position come in here with tears. You came in with a weaponized server. What, precisely, did you have in mind?" This was the moment. This was where the silent takeover began. My first move. "The police can wait," I said. Right now, they think I'm a suspect. Let them. Let Richard think his plan is working perfectly. Let him get comfortable. He'll be watching me, waiting for me to panic, to hire some bumbling local lawyer to fall apart. I'm going to do none of those things. I'm going to do the last thing he would ever expect. I'm going to a spa," I said. Evelyn raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Richard and I have a significant portfolio of joint assets," I explained. Pulling out a folder of my own. "My little spreadsheets. The house, our investment accounts, a vacation property in the San Juan Islands. He thinks of it as his money, of course, but my name is on everything. Before he gets any clever ideas about moving things around, I want you to file an immediate ex parte emergency financial restraining order. Freeze everything. The joint accounts, the credit cards, the home equity line, everything. I want him to go to the ATM to pull out cash for lunch and find his card declined. An ex parte order is aggressive," Evelyn noted, a glint of approval in her eye. "It means he won't be notified until after the freeze is in place. You'll need to declare you're filing for divorce and claim he's a financial risk who is likely to dissipate marital assets, which, given that he's embezzled $2 million, shouldn't be hard to prove." "He is a financial risk," I said coldly. "He's also a liar and a thief who is trying to send his wife to prison. I think I can live with being aggressive. This will trigger all-out war, you know," he warned. "He declared war when he handed my name to the police," I replied. "I'm just choosing the battlefield." So that was the plan. Evelyn would file the paperwork the next morning. In the meantime, I would create my own alibi. I packed an overnight bag, booked a 2-day retreat at a luxury spa 2 hours north, and sent Richard a text. Feeling a bit overwhelmed by everything. Going to a spa for a couple of days to clear my head. Please don't worry. The subtext was clear. I was behaving exactly as the weak, emotional wife he imagined me to be. I was running away to cry and get a massage. It would confirm his belief that I was fragile and cracking under the pressure. It was the perfect cover. The next afternoon, I was lying on a massage table, surrounded by the scent of eucalyptus and the sound of trickling water, when my phone, which I had left on vibrate in my robe pocket, started to buzz incessantly. I ignored it. I knew what was happening. The freeze was in effect. Richard was in a state of pure, unadulterated panic. After my massage, I checked my phone. 14 missed calls from Richard, 8 from his mother, 6 from his father, a stream of increasingly frantic texts. From Richard, Nancy, call me immediately. What the hell is going on? My cards are being declined. Did you do something to the accounts? This is not funny. Lawyers are involved. What is this, Nancy? Are you insane? I swear to God, you have no idea what you've just done. You are making a huge mistake. His panic was a balm to my soul. He was flailing. He had lost control, and it was driving him mad. He had expected me to be the one panicking, but instead, I had launched a silent, devastating counterattack from a place of perceived weakness. He thought I was getting a facial. In reality, I was liquidating his life. The texts from his mother, Eleanor, were even more revealing. Nancy dear, Richard is very worried. He says there's been some sort of bank error. Please call him. Nancy, this is not like you. Whatever is going on, you need to remember who your family is. We support you. Richard said, you've hired a lawyer. That is a terrible, hostile thing to do. You are tearing this family apart over a misunderstanding. Tearing the family apart. The classic line. I wasn't tearing anything apart. I was simply refusing to be the sacrificial lamb that held their precious, dysfunctional family together. This was my first move. It wasn't about the money. It was about control. Richard's entire world was built on his ability to control narratives, people, and finances. In one swift, silent move, I had taken that away from him. He was now locked out of his own life, and he had no idea why. He still thought he held all the cards. He had his airtight alibi, and his pile of falsified evidence against me. He couldn't comprehend that I wasn't playing his game. I was playing a completely different one, on a board he didn't even know existed. That evening, I sat on the balcony of my spa suite, overlooking a placid, wooded valley. I ordered an expensive dinner, paid for with a credit card that was in my name only, one he knew nothing about. I sipped a glass of crisp, cold Sauvignon Blanc and watched the sun set. For the first time, in 15 years, I felt a sense of profound, exhilarating peace. The panic had begun. His panic. And it was the most beautiful sound in the world. He had no idea what was coming next. This was just the opening salvo. The real pain, the real consequences, were still to come. He thought this was about a bank account. He was about to learn it was about the complete and utter demolition of his world. Piece by painstaking piece, the 2 days at the spa were a strategic retreat, a period of calm before the storm. I knew I had unleashed. When I returned home, the house felt different. The air was thick with a stale, desperate energy. A vase of flowers was on the kitchen counter, an obvious, pathetic peace offering. They were lilies, which was darkly amusing, because Richard knew I was allergic to them. It was such a perfect, thoughtless gesture, a clear sign that he wasn't trying to appease me, but rather to perform the role of a husband who appeases. The barrage of calls and texts had continued, but I'd ignored them all. Silence was a weapon he didn't know how to fight. His power lay in his ability to talk, to persuade, to bully, to manipulate. By refusing to engage, I was rendering his primary weapon useless. The true family exodus, as I later came to call it, began that evening. It started with his father, Thomas Parker. He was a man cut from the same cloth as Richard, arrogant, dismissive, and utterly convinced of his own patriarchal wisdom. He showed up at the front door, unannounced, his face a mask of grim disappointment. "Nancy," he said, striding past me into the foyer, as if he owned the place, which in his mind, he probably thought he did. "We need to talk. This has gone far enough." We sat in the formal living room, the same room where the detectives had turned my world upside down. It was becoming my personal battleground. "Richard is a wreck," Thomas began, his voice laced with accusation. His own wife, locking him out of his own accounts, filing for divorce. "What on earth has gotten into you? Do you have any idea the damage you're doing?" I looked at him, my expression placid. "Yes, I think I do. Richard tried to frame me for grand larceny and embezzlement. He's trying to send me to prison. I'd say freezing our joint assets is a rather measured response, all things considered. Thomas waved a dismissive hand, as if I'd complained about a leaky faucet. Oh, a misunderstanding. Richard explained everything. It's some sort of mix-up with the company's IT department. He's sorting it out. He's beside himself that you were even questioned. For you to react like this, to be so vindictive, it's deeply disappointing, Nancy. After everything this family has done for you, everything this family has done for me. The words hung in the air, dripping with condescension. They had given me a name, a beautiful house, a lifestyle. In their eyes, I was an acquisition, a subsidiary of the Parker family brand, and I was horribly in breach of my contract. He didn't just explain it to you, Thomas, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. He provided the police with falsified evidence. He built a case against me. This wasn't a mix-up. It was a meticulously planned attempt to ruin my life. Nonsense, he snapped, his patience wearing thin. You're being hysterical. Richard loves you. Now, you are going to call off your lawyer. You are going to unfreeze the accounts, and you are going to sit down with your husband and work through this like a sane and rational adult. The Parker name is not going to be dragged through a messy public divorce because you're having some sort of menopausal fit. The mask had slipped. The patronizing concern was gone, replaced by the raw, ugly threat underneath. Protect the family name. That was the prime directive. My life, my freedom, my well-being. Those were all acceptable collateral damage. I stood up. Thank you for coming, Thomas. You've made your position very clear. Please see yourself out. He stared at me, his mouth agape. He was so accustomed to being obeyed, to his pronouncements being treated as royal decrees, that my calm dismissal short-circuited his brain. Is that it? You're throwing me out, after I came all this way to talk some sense into you. There's no sense to be talked, I said, walking to the front door and holding it open. There is only the truth. You've chosen to believe your son's convenient lies. That's your prerogative. But your access to this house, and to me, is now officially revoked. Goodbye. He stormed out, sputtering about my ingratitude and foolishness. As he left, another car pulled into the driveway. It was Richard's sister, Caroline, the golden child, an aspiring lifestyle influencer, whose lifestyle was entirely funded by a generous allowance from her parents and brother. She was Richard's staunchest defender, and my most passive-aggressive critic. She breezed in, all fake smiles and concerned glances. Nancy, oh thank goodness. Daddy just called me. He was so upset. I knew it couldn't be true. You can't be divorcing Richie. You two are the perfect couple. Her performance was so transparent, it was almost comical. This was the desperate counter-manipulation phase. Phase 1, patriarchal intimidation, had failed. Now it was time for Phase 2, faux feminine solidarity and emotional guilt. Caroline, please, I said, not bothering to invite her to sit. Let's not. No, I mean it, she insisted, her voice rising with manufactured emotion. I know Richie can be a lot. He's so driven, you know. Sometimes he gets tunnel vision. But he adores you. This whole company thing, it's a nightmare for him. He feels so responsible, so guilty that you've been dragged into it. He's just trying to protect you, protect me, by creating a false digital trail to implicate me in a federal crime. The audacity was stunning. He told me you've been not yourself lately, she continued, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. He's worried you're stressed, maybe depressed, that you're not thinking clearly. Maybe you need to talk to someone. Dr. Evans is wonderful. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. It felt so good. They were trying to build a new narrative. I wasn't just a criminal anymore. Now I was mentally unstable. It was so predictable, so pathetic. He's not worried, Caroline. He's terrified. And he should be, I said, my laughter dying down. Let me give you a piece of advice. You and your parents have been living off of Richard's success for years. But that success was built on a foundation of lies. And as it turns out, stolen money. The ground is about to give way beneath you all. I'd find a new source of income, if I were you. The bank of Richard is permanently closed. Caroline's face, which had been a mask of syrupy concern, hardened into a venomous scowl. You're a real piece of work. You know that. After everything Richie has given you, you were a nobody when he met you. A librarian. He gave you this life. And this is how you repay him. By trying to ruin him over some money. You are a cold, heartless bitch. No, I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. I was a librarian. I dealt in facts, in evidence, in primary sources, and I have all the primary sources I need. Now get out of my house. She left, slamming the door behind her. The exodus was complete. In the span of one evening, I had been visited by the three arms of the Parker family's manipulative machine: the patriarch, the matriarch's proxy, and the golden child. They had tried intimidation, guilt, and gaslighting, and all they had managed to do was reveal their true colors. They didn't care about me. They didn't even really care about Richard. They cared about the ecosystem of comfort and privilege that he provided, an ecosystem that I was now threatening to collapse. They still thought I was reacting emotionally. They thought my only leverage was a frozen bank account. They were still operating in the dark, fighting a shadow. The true power shift hadn't even happened yet. That would come when I turned on the lights, and I planned to do it in the most public, most humiliating way possible. The family had abandoned me. Soon they would be abandoning him, scrambling to distance themselves from the explosion they couldn't see was coming. The final confrontation wasn't a dramatic, tear-filled showdown in our living room. That's what Richard would have wanted. It would have given him a stage. My stage was much colder, much more clinical, and far more terrifying for a man like him. A conference room at Evelyn Reed's law firm. After a week of silence from my end and escalating, unhinged voicemails from his, Evelyn sent a formal request for a meeting to Richard's newly hired lawyer. The purpose, she stated, was to discuss the immediate and orderly dissolution of the marriage and a preliminary review of asset division. Richard, likely thinking he could intimidate me in a formal setting, and convinced this was all a hysterical overreaction to a simple misunderstanding, readily agreed. He thought he was walking into a negotiation. He was walking into an execution. I saw him for the first time in over a week, across the long, polished table. He looked tired, his usually impeccable suit slightly rumpled. The stress was getting to him. The lack of control was eating him alive. He tried to give me a look of wounded disappointment, but I could see the fury simmering just beneath the surface. He sat next to his lawyer, a slick-looking man named Henderson, who had the overconfident air of a shark, who didn't realize he was about to be devoured by a kraken. Evelyn began, her tone brisk and businesslike. Thank you all for coming. We are here to discuss the divorce proceedings between my client, Nancy Parker, and Mr. Richard Parker. Given the circumstances, my client is prepared to be very generous. She is willing to walk away from this marriage with only a few select personal assets. Richard visibly relaxed. A smug, triumphant look flickered across his face. He thought I was folding. He leaned over and whispered something to Henderson, who nodded. My client is, of course, devastated by this turn of events, Henderson said smoothly. But he is a reasonable man. We are pleased to hear that Mrs. Parker is approaching this with a level head. What are her terms? Simple, Evelyn said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. Mrs. Parker will retain the full contents of her personal investment account, which she managed and funded herself prior to and during the marriage. She will retain her vehicle, and she will retain sole, unencumbered ownership of the marital home on Westland Drive. Henderson choked on his water. Richard's face went from smug to purple with rage. The house? Are you insane? That house is worth $3 million. It's the primary marital asset. It is, Evelyn agreed calmly. And Nancy is taking it. In exchange, she is willing to sign over her entire 50% stake in all other joint assets to you, Richard. The brokerage account, the vacation property, the art collection. It's all yours. Richard stared at her, then at me, a look of dawning comprehension and utter contempt on his face. He thought he understood my play. I see, he said, his voice dripping with venom. You're trying to blackmail me. You think you can use this police nonsense as leverage to steal my house. It won't work, Nancy. I'm the victim here. The evidence is clear. You're the one who should be begging for a deal, not making demands. I hadn't said a word yet. Now, I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the table. It's not blackmail, Richard. It's a gift. I'm giving you a chance to walk away from this with something. Because in about 10 minutes, that offer is going off the table forever. You have nothing, he snarled, finally dropping the facade. You have a frozen bank account and a mountain of evidence against you. What do you think you have? Evelyn smiled faintly. What she has, Mr. Henderson, is irrefutable, time-stamped, high-definition proof of her innocence, and by extension, irrefutable proof of your client's guilt. She swiveled her large monitor on the table to face them. Allow me to introduce you to the Athenaeum. She clicked the mouse, and there it was, in my living room, on the screen. There I was, on the couch, talking to Anya. Evelyn fast-forwarded, stopping at key moments. His, she said, is from March 15th, at 8:47 p.m. At the exact moment, $500,000 was being wired from Parker Logistics to an account in the Cayman Islands. My client was, as you can see, leading a discussion on scalable server architecture, with a dozen witnesses, both in the room and attending remotely. Her voice is audible. Her face is visible. The timestamp, as you can see in the corner, is cryptographically signed and unalterable. She clicked to another file, and this is from March 22nd. Another transfer and another alibi. Nancy is advising a startup founder on her pitch deck. Click, March 29th. Another transfer. Nancy is deep in a debate over the ethics of machine learning. She went on like this for 5 solid minutes, a rapid-fire presentation of my innocence and his guilt. With every click, the color drained from Richard's face, his jaw went slack. The smug confidence evaporated, replaced by the raw, primal terror of a man who has been caught in a perfect trap. He looked like he was going to be sick. Henderson, his lawyer, was staring at the screen, his face a pale, horrified mask. He was a divorce lawyer, not a criminal defense attorney. He was completely out of his depth. We have 2 hours of footage for every single fraudulent transaction, Evelyn concluded, her voice like ice. A perfect, digital, time-stamped alibi. When we present this to the detectives, and we will be meeting with them this afternoon, they will not only drop all interest in my client, they will open a new investigation into your client for embezzlement, wire fraud, and filing a false police report. You provided them with falsified evidence, Richard. That's a felony. You didn't just try to frame your wife, you tried to frame her for a crime you committed. Juries tend to frown upon that. Silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Richard was broken. He was staring at me, his eyes wide, with a look I had never seen before. Fear. He had finally realized that the quiet, unassuming woman he had married and systematically underestimated for 15 years had just dismantled his entire world with a laptop. So Evelyn said, leaning back in her chair, let's go back to the house. You can sign it over, along with a full confession to be provided to your company's board and the authorities. In return for your full cooperation, Nancy will not pursue a civil suit for damages, or you can refuse. We can walk out of this room, go directly to the police, and you can take your chances with the federal prosecutor. Your choice. Richard didn't even look at his lawyer. He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. The new reality was crashing down on him. The life he knew was over. His reputation was destroyed. His family's name was mud. His freedom was a matter of negotiation. All because he thought my book club was boring. He finally found his voice, a choked, pathetic whisper. Why? I looked him dead in the eye. You built a cage for me, Richard. You just never bothered to check if I had my own set of keys. He slumped in his chair, a completely defeated man. It was over. The power had shifted, completely and irrevocably. I felt no pity. I felt no pity. I felt no rage. I just felt the quiet, clean satisfaction of a problem solved. The vindication was absolute. In the end, Richard took the deal. What choice did he have. He signed over the house, the car, and wrote a full, signed confession that Evelyn's team drafted. Henderson, his lawyer, looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The next day, Evelyn and I met with detectives Albright and Miller. I've never seen two people's professional expressions change so fast. They went from polite skepticism to slack-jawed astonishment as Evelyn laid out the evidence. The case against me was dropped before we even finished our coffee. The case against Richard was opened with what I can only describe as gleeful enthusiasm. The fallout was swift and brutal. Richard was arrested at his office, a public and humiliating spectacle that made the local news. The board of Parker Logistics, armed with his confession, fired him and initiated a lawsuit to claw back every penny he had stolen. His father, Thomas, who had been so quick to defend him, was implicated in the company's internal investigation for financial mismanagement and was forced into a disgraced retirement. His mother, Eleanor, stopped calling me. Caroline's lifestyle vanished overnight. Her last Instagram post was a tearful, vague message about overcoming adversity before her account went private. The Parker family, once a local dynasty, became a cautionary tale. They didn't just lose their money, they lost their standing, their reputation, which to people like them was far worse. As for me, I found that my new reality was quiet. The big, empty house was mine now. For the first few weeks, the silence was deafening. There was no one to condescend to me, no one to dismiss my thoughts, no one to fill the space with their own booming ego. It was just me, and it was wonderful. I sold the house. It held too many ghosts, too many memories of a life that wasn't mine. I sold all the stiff, formal furniture and the art Richard had chosen. I used the money to buy a smaller, beautiful townhouse overlooking the water, a place filled with light and books. I also used a significant portion of it to become the first and primary investor in Anya's startup. Her software company launched 6 months later to incredible reviews. Watching her, a brilliant woman who had been told no one 100 times, finally succeed on her own terms was a victory that felt almost as sweet as my own. The Athenaeum, our secret club, is still going strong. We meet on Wednesdays, but now we do it in my new living room, which is comfortable and warm and entirely mine. We still talk about books, sometimes, but mostly we talk about our work, our ambitions, our victories. We are a fortress of our own making. Sometimes I think about Richard. I hear he took a plea bargain and is serving a few years in a minimum security facility. His family, stripped of their wealth and status, has faded into obscurity. There's a part of me, a small, stubborn part, that wants to feel something, pity, anger, even a shred of the love I once had. But there's nothing there. It's like looking at a photograph of a stranger. He didn't just betray me. He revealed that the man I thought I knew never really existed. He was a performance, and the final act was a disaster. People might say, what I did was harsh. They might say, I should have just cleared my name and walked away. They might ask, was it really necessary to dismantle his entire life? And I guess that's a debatable point. But here's the thing. It wasn't about revenge, not in the way you see in movies. It was about consequences. Richard lived in a world without consequences, a world cushioned by his privilege, his gender, and his family's name. He believed he could do anything, take anything, and get away with it. All I did was remove the cushions. All I did was present the bill for his actions. Gravity did the rest. So I want to talk to you, for a second. To anyone out there who has ever been underestimated. To anyone who has been made to feel small, so someone else could feel big. To anyone who has a boring little hobby that is actually the thing that keeps them sane, the thing that is entirely, secretly, wonderfully theirs. Don't ever let anyone dismiss it. Don't ever let anyone make you feel that your quiet passions are insignificant. You never know when that little corner of your life, that thing you've been nurturing in the shadows, will turn out to be the floodlight that exposes all the lies. You never know when your book club will turn out to be a war room. Your strength doesn't always have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes, the most devastating weapon is the one they never ever see coming. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had a moment where you realized you were stronger than anyone gave you credit for, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. It's amazing what we can get through when we have to. And if you enjoyed this, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories about getting what you deserve. We all have a story to tell, and it's time we started telling them.